Okay, so we this evening are going to be talking about Pillars of Protestantism. What does it mean to be a Protestant? We know some, we've been talking about them, particularly last week with sacraments. But let us begin with a word of prayer. Holy One, we continue on with our journey, and we pause for just a moment to not seek your presence, but rather to acknowledge it. For we know that you are here with us, moving among us, and we pray that we might grow in wisdom and understanding. We give you thanks for this blessing of faith and all of your blessings. Amen. Okay, so Pillars of Protestantism. The Protestant Reformation started with this guy, Martin Luther. Okay, you're not going to have to remember this today because we're going to go over it next week in church history. But the Protestant Reformation technically started with Martin Luther. And actually, yes, please write that down. I apologize. Yep, need to know. Martin Luther. He was actually a Catholic priest. He had questions with practices and beliefs in the Catholic Church. And I will give you 5 points if you can tell me when he started the Protestant Reformation. How about 3 points for the month? I'll have to give you a hint. It's actually a day that is very popular for kids, not Christmas. Think of another day. Yep, actually October 31st, there you go. And on October 31st, 1517, he went to the cathedral in Wittenberg, Germany, and he posted his 95 Theses on the door. And these were 95 things that he wanted to talk about, practices and beliefs in the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church did not respond very well. They excommunicated, which means excommunion, you can't take communion. So we're not going to go through all 95. I'm just going to go through 5. The number one thing that makes us Protestant is salvation by faith. That is important. That is the number one thing about us that defines us as Protestants. Salvation by faith. How are you put in right relationship with God? It is 100% our faith. Our faith in what God did for us in the birth of Jesus, his life and teachings, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. Salvation by faith. That is different than it is in the Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church, the formula for salvation, so to speak, is faith plus works. Okay? In the Catholic Church, they say that if you want to be right with God, it's your faith in what God has done for us, but also your good deeds. That's what works means. So faith plus works. And you do enough of them, and you have enough faith, and you're going to be okay with God. There is a problem with this formula, though. How much faith and how much work? Is it 50-50? Is it 90% faith, 10% works? And in addition to that, Martin Luther said that when you try to earn your way into God's good graces, it's going to get you into all kinds of trouble. You're going to end up on one of two paths that both lead to a dead end. All right? The first one is pride. When you try to get in good with God and you include your works of good deeds, it could lead you to pride. Look at me, I am such a good person. You know, God really loves me better than all of those other people out there who are going to that other place. The other problem with including good deeds in salvation can lead to despair. Have I done enough? Have I done enough to make God love me? And that was Martin Luther's problem. He kept trying to do more to prove that he was worthy of God's love, and he did all kinds of things. He fasted. He slept on a stone slab without a blanket in the middle of the night. He got up at all hours to pray, and he was always still feeling it wasn't good enough. And he drove himself miserable. And so what happened is one day he was reading the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans. 5 points if you can tell me what the other word is for letters. Paul's letters are also known, it begins with the letter E. Remember what the other word is for letters? E-P-I-S. You got it, epistles. Yep. So Paul was reading, Martin Luther was reading the Apostle Paul's epistle to the Romans, chapter 1, verse 7, and it says, the righteous shall live by faith. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, it isn't our good deeds at all. It's God, 100% God, okay? And here's a way to look at it. Logan, I'm going to pick on you. Why don't you come up here for a second, please? All right, so Logan's got a problem right there, my friend. So he did something really bad this past week. And so he knows he's got a black mark on his heavenly report card. And he's probably not going to get to go to heaven. You don't want that to happen, do you? No. You want to get rid of that black mark on your heavenly report card, right? So how about we do this? So Logan, to get rid of that black mark, because according to the Catholic Church, salvation equals faith plus works, he's going to help a little old lady across the street this week, and he's going to do some extra chores, and he's going to put $5 in the collection plate on Sunday. So, no more black mark for Logan? Oh, yes. He's in bigger trouble, because let's ask this question. Is Logan doing those good deeds just because he really cares about that little old lady and he really wants the church to be able to do what it can, so he's going to give that $5? No, he's doing it because he's selfish. He wants to get rid of that black mark. So now Logan, instead of just one black mark, has 3 black marks on his heavenly report card. And he's in worse condition. Thank you, my friend. So, what Protestant faith says, it's 100% God, grace, God, okay? So what we believe is that, you know, what Logan does is he goes to God and he prays and he turns his heart around, okay? And God forgives. Now, the question then becomes, so do we have to not worry about the good deeds? Does Logan not have to help that little old lady across the street or put that $5 in there? He doesn't to have it be in God's good graces, but see, he still does it now, but there's a difference. Now he does those good deeds, not because he's trying to make God love him. He does it to express his gratitude for what God has done for him, okay? So the food pantry and all that we did, we weren't trying to do that to say, hey, God, you know, bless us. We did all of that because we have been blessed by God. And so we wanted to express that. So in the Protestant church, I didn't have this, but I would like you to write it down. So remember that In the Catholic Church, it's salvation equals faith equals worth. Salvation equals faith plus works. The Protestant version is salvation equals faith, and then after the faith, put another equal sign, and then put works. So in other words, same thing, just change that plus sign to an equal sign. That's the Protestant understanding. That's what makes us Protestants. Salvation comes from faith, and faith comes from actually, now that I think about it, the way you would do it is put faith first. Faith equals salvation, which equals works. So, all righty. Okay. Second thing that you need to know, we are a people of the book. We are a people of the book, which means that all faiths have to have a way of knowing what we believe or how we should live our lives. And for us, we go to the book, and the book obviously is the Bible. In the Catholic Church, it's the Bible, but it's also the teachings of the Church. It's also the Pope. And so we are a people of the book. In fact, in the Catholic Church, did you know that when the Pope speaks ex cathedra, which is Latin, meaning from the chair, that he is infallible? He cannot be wrong. Yep. There's a special chair in the Vatican, and when the Pope reads a doctrine from that chair, ex cathedra, the Catholic Church tells us that he's infallible. He cannot be wrong. Okay? Protestants say the only place we go to learn who we should be, what we should believe, is the Bible. Okay, and we talked about this before. Bible, bibliography, collection of books. All right? The other thing that makes us Protestant, we talked about this, 2 sacraments. 5 points if anybody can tell me one of the sacraments that we celebrate in the Protestant Church. Baptism is correct. What is the other sacrament that we celebrate in the Protestant Church? Communion. All righty. And here's a question for you. This past Sunday, when we celebrated communion, did I forget to say what I was supposed to say? No. I stood there and I said, the table that we celebrate is open. Therefore, all who wish to know the risen Christ are welcome. So baptism is one, and the other is communion. This next one is very important. In the Protestant Church, we believe in the priesthood of all believers. Priesthood of all believers. That is so important. What does priesthood of all believers mean? Well, Martin Luther said that all of us are ministers. Every single one of us is a minister. There are ordained ministers, like myself, and then there are lay ministers, like you. And so ministry is simply taking the gifts that God has given you and using them in a way that spreads God's love. So, for example, I notice our twins here, I think, came from athletic practice or something. Which sport? Track. Okay. All right. You can actually use track to do ministry, believe it or not. So how could they be ministers by doing track? If you helped coach younger kids and teach them, okay, you're helping someone. Or you've heard of Special Olympics, right? So if you use your athletic skills to help with the Special Olympics, you are being a minister. You know, anytime you do something that helps someone else, you are doing ministry. And I always illustrate it with this guy here, Albrecht Dürer. He was a painter. He painted this famous painting called The Praying Hands. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with this, but Praying Hands, there's a story behind this that I love. And so Albrecht Dürer came from a big family. I think he had like 11 brothers and sisters. And so he had a brother who also wanted to be an artist. And it was a very poor family. So he said to Albrecht, I will go to work and support you while you become a famous artist. And then when you have become a famous artist, you can support me and I'll develop my art talents. So the brother went to work in a quarry. And if you're not familiar with quarries, they're damp, very hard work. His brother developed arthritis and he couldn't paint. So he gave his dream up while Albrecht became a well-known painter. So one day, Albrecht came home and he saw his brother sitting at a table praying. And he said to himself, I can never give those hands back the gift they once had. Okay, he's got arthritis. He's never going to be a famous artist. He made that sacrifice for me. And I can never give those hands back the gift they once had. But I can paint those hands as they are now to show the world the gift they gave to me. So I tell that story, and then I ask, who had the greater gift? The one who painted the hands, or the one whose hands were painted? And I would say it was the one whose hands were painted because of the sacrifice that he made. Okay? So, you know, on Sunday morning, I'm up here, Mrs. McGlaughlin's up here, but it isn't about us. It's about God calling all of us to find what our gifts are and how we can use them to make the world a better place. One of my favorite stories, a man has a dream, and in the dream, God says, I'm calling you, and I want you to do this, that, or some other thing. And the man in the dream says, God, why do you call me? Why did you call me? And God says, I call everyone. So believe it or not, God is calling you. The question is, are you listening? Next one. Freedom of religious conscience. That is particularly important for us as Congregationalists because we are covenantal. We're not creedal. What's the difference? In a creedal church, there's a list of beliefs that you're supposed to accept. Okay? And if you don't accept those beliefs, then technically you're not a faithful member of that church. Okay? Congregationalists look at it differently. For us, the test of whether you're a good Christian isn't your specific beliefs, it's how you live your life. Okay? So let me ask you this question. The Bible says that God created the heavens and earth in 6 days. Okay? So do you believe that, or do you believe that God created using the process of evolution over billions of years? Okay? So how many would say they believe that God created the heavens and the earth through evolution? I do. Okay? Now, I will tell you that there are some people in our congregation who would believe that it was 6 days, like it says in the Bible. Okay? But we're Congregationalists. We're covenantal. So what that means is that you can believe evolution. Someone can believe 6 days in creation. No one can say you're a bad person because you believe differently, okay? And I always illustrate this. What do you see in this picture? Okay, so you see an old lady, and she's kind of looking down, isn't she? Okay. Anybody see something else up there? Yeah?
There's like a tree and it looks like a tree in the
Okay. Look at the whole picture. Do you see, when you look at the whole picture, do you see something else? What do you see, Michael? Yeah, there's also a young lady, and she's kind of looking back over her shoulder, isn't she? How many see both? There's two people in that picture. You see both? Okay. How many? Yeah, so how many see? Okay. See the old lady's mouth? Okay, see the black line with the old, wait, do you see the old lady or the young lady?
the young lady.
Okay, she's looking back over her shoulder, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't see the old lady. Okay, so you see where looks like the young lady's wearing like a little necklace or something? That's the old lady's mouth. And down below it is her chin. Okay? And see the young lady's ear? That's actually the old lady's eye. She's looking down, whereas the other one's looking back. You don't see, which one don't you see?
I see the old lady.
You don't see the young lady, okay? So, okay, you just saw it, didn't you?
Now I see it.
You see both of it, okay? Okay. Believe it or not, that's what faith is. Faith is seeing things that you didn't see before about God and life and everything, okay? So you're both trying to see the...
Is the old lady's mouth the young lady's neck?
Yes.
That's neck.
Do you see them? You see both? Okay. So I do this because when it comes to God's truth is greater than we can ever possibly know. Okay? And so that's why we have to listen to each other, because if we use this as a symbol of God's truth, you may be seeing a bit of God's truth that I'm not seeing, okay? And vice versa. And so that's why we have to listen to each other, because you know what? None of us were there when God created the heavens and the earth, okay? So can any of us say with absolute 100% certainty which way it happened? Absolutely not. Now, I believe in evolution, and I'll tell you a story. So when I was a student minister, I did a children's message one time about creation, and I had a knick-knack shelf that I made when I was in school, and I said to everyone, I made this. And then I pointed to a chair, and I said, you know, somebody made this chair. And then I said, you know, when you think about it, somebody made this church. And I kept getting bigger and bigger, and I said, and then who made the stars and the planets? And this little boy started to talk about the Big Bang, okay? I wasn't expecting that. He said, you know, the Big Bang, and then this happened, that happened, and he got finished, and I said, you know what? I believe all of that too, but here's one question that I have when it comes to the Big Bang. Who lit the match? Things just don't happen, okay? I mean, what's the likelihood that that lectern is just going to decide to fall over on its own? Unless there's an earthquake or I push it over, that's going to stay where it is, right? Things just don't happen. So if there's a Big Bang, there still has to be somebody behind the Big Bang to light the match. So we have to listen to each other, because no one has a monopoly when it comes to God's truth. And again, we are covenantal, which means that we believe that you can disagree on questions of faith and still be sincere in your desire to follow the risen Jesus. And I put this picture here, and this is a picture of the landing in Salem, Massachusetts, of the Puritans. And the Puritans, and the Pilgrims for that matter, are our theological ancestors. Okay, Congregationalists came from the Puritans and the Pilgrims. And before they got off the boat, they signed a covenant. 10 points. What is a covenant? We talked about covenants, and we talked about the covenant with Abraham and the Promised Land, and the covenant with David. What is a covenant?
Is it like a little paper thing that like everyone signs?
Well, yeah. But a covenant is it's an agreement. It's a sacred relationship. Okay, a covenant is celebrating a sacred relationship. And so before they got off the ship, they signed a covenant. And it's called the Salem Covenant. We, in this church, still use this covenant. You don't have to write this down, but this is our church covenant. It's the same covenant that they signed when they got off the ship in Salem, Massachusetts. So why don't we say it together? We covenant with the Lord and one with another, and do bind ourselves in the presence of God to walk together in all his ways, according as he is pleased to reveal himself unto us in his blessed word of truth. Is there anything in there about specific beliefs? It just says, this is how we're going to relate to each other. We're going to walk together as God's children. So that is known as the Salem Covenant. We are a covenantal community of faith, not a creedal. Okay. Now, how are we doing? Doing okay. So now, we have finished this evening's class, but we do have one more thing to go over. And as confirmands, you will be serving as acolytes beginning in the fall. Hopefully. Pretty sure. All right. How many of you have seen the acolytes in the church? Okay. They will come down, they light the candles at the beginning, they extinguish the candles at the end of the service. So, hopefully I've got the sound on this. Turn this off for a second. So we put together a training video on how you serve as acolytes. So we'd like you to watch this training video. And I may stop it if I don't hear the sound.
All be satisfied. I will give my life to them. Whom shall I send?
So that is what you do as an acolyte, and it didn't show it when they came up the first time, but one of the big important things is that when you have your taper, you don't turn to the inside because you'll clang and crash into each other with the taper, so you turn to the outside. And you may have noticed one was blowing it out. That's because the second taper, that it's called, needed some oil, and we'll take a second and show that. So let me just stop the live stream here, and we'll just go back and take a quick look.